Hello, everybody. What's on your mind? What is up? Hope you all had a good day. LOL. Okay, what? What is the best JoJo part? It's a great question. A liberal and a communist. It's a big difference. Liberals believe in private property, communists do not. Liberals support capitalism, communists do not. Um, at the end of the day, liberals believe in individualism, uh, communists are collectivists. Smoking and TikTok, and that's it. So there's a lot of difference. Liberals have more in common with conservatives, which conservatism really is just a form of liberalism. The two, even in other countries, the liberals, what they call liberals in like Europe, are conservative actually. Um, so, I mean, even look at the Democratic and Republican Party. Um, Economically, they are not very different. More likes can I? Okay. So what's up, guys? The Democrats and Republicans economically both, support neoliberal economic policies. They're not very different. Hey, New Mexico. The Democrats and Republicans differ on, like, cultural issues, identity politics. But when it comes to their corporate masters, that's who they really serve. Open your mind. Yeah, do you like Ho Chi Minh? Fuck yeah, I like Ho Chi Minh, man. That dude was a revolutionary. Ho Chi Minh fought the French, fought the Americans, and won. Organized farmers. Amazing what he did. Uh, there was one podcast episode from Rev Left Radio when they talked about how they started with 8 people and they created an entire revolution out of starting with 8 people. Unbelievable. Ho Chi Minh, hell yeah. I like Ho Chi Minh because he fought superpowers. Yeah, he. Don't forget that he fought Japan as well. I mean, the dude was unbelievable. He fought it. Okay, I got some guest requests.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How you doing?
You know, Saturday night, parent life.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Me too. Me too. Kids are in bed, and I'm here to go on TikTok for a little bit.
what an amazing world 2021 is for adults.
Where are you coming from?
I'm sorry.
Where are you calling from?
Uh, Midwest.
Okay. I'm in New York.
Um, not too far. Nice place to visit. So, like, what kind of? I guess, I scrolled through your bio. Like, what kind of socialist ideas or ideologies do you, I guess, like or would like to implement? Like, I assume probably something like a livable wage or like healthcare along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, those are like social democratic reforms that I think would just bring the United States up to speed with the rest of the capitalist world. I don't think anything uh, of that nature is really anything too radical, although it's radical for the United States that has like nothing compared to what the rest of the developed world has. But I think that we would need to bring things a bit further. And other than like livable wage and universal health care, we would need to have the working class be in power in the United States for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
where this country was founded by oligarchs and they created a plutocracy that really served their interests. and the working class has never really been in power here. And we've needed to struggle um, for every little reform and bit of progress that we've made since then.
Hmm. So, like, what would be your ideal like livable wage then?
Well, look, when we talk about wages, what I really want to see is I want to see an end to wages. Wages are what the worker receives as a result of selling his labor to the capitalist.
This time, yeah.
Um, yeah, the worker doesn't own anything, and the worker sells all his labor, all his self. The worker becomes a commodity. So, I mean, what I would want to see is the worker owning what we call the means of production, and the workers collectively owning and operating the workplace and not getting a wage, getting the full value of their labor. One thing
The
I
work
hear
for free?
conservatives say, no, no, not work for free, but you know how if you've ever traded in the stock market or anything, which I have, all that profit that the workers get is what you're getting when you own stock.
So like
And
profit
what
sharing.
it's profit sharing. Yeah, the workers would receive the profit of their labor instead of selling their labor and giving 100% of the profit away to the capitalists.
So like, so a company is giving away 100% of its profits to its employees.
The employees would own the company.
So then who would have a say in what? How to expand, come up with new ideas, marketing?
Yeah. So what happens now is that like the shareholders really democratically control the workplace. If you're a shareholder, you have shareholder meetings, you get to vote on the board of directors, and then the board of directors chooses the CEO, right? So that's like an upside down triangle. What would happen democratically as well is the workers would have a say in how the workplace is run and the leadership. And I think they'd do a better job than shareholders who really don't care about anything but profit. Let's say there's a factory in a town, okay? And right now that factory is owned by shareholders that live all over the world, and they really couldn't care less if that factory is polluting the water source for that town. But if the workers owned that factory, of course they wouldn't want those waters being polluted. They could make choices that would benefit the organization and the town. It 100% pure profit wouldn't be the motive at all times at the cost of the people and the environment.
Mm-hmm. That's understandable. I know it's just using as an example, but always, like the city or county can always come in and explain to them that they have to change or they'll be
Sure.
cited every day for infractions. I know that was just used as an example, but that would be
Yeah.
a difference of that. Um, I I guess I understand of the standpoint you're coming from, but you know, in a way, I don't know. I has this ideology, or I guess this system that you want to implement, has this been tested in other countries of being successful,
I would say
or
it
is it
has.
is it more of like a theoretical utopia ideology?
No, look, I've been to socialist countries. I went to Cuba a couple of years ago, and I spoke with a lot of Cubans. And the story that you get from people there and the story that you get here is really, really different. Workers in Cuba, although Cuba is under immense sanctions, they just went under more sanctions during COVID. Cuba was sending doctors around the world to help countries in need, and the United States put them under more sanctions as they were doing that and crushed their economy even more, starving their people. But they have something like that there What they even have is if you work in a factory, whether it's cigar factory or clothing, whatever, all the workers get a certain percentage of what they make. And then they can sell in certain places and take 100% of the profit of that. And just their workers' rights and their hours and the working conditions are much better than what we even have here. So there are forms of that in all, different countries.
But it's a pretty heavily impoverished country, isn't it?
It is, but that's mainly due to their decades of sanctions. Their economic sanctions prevent them from getting basic needs. We say their buildings are crumbling, but they're not able to import building materials.
Well, in most areas, it's their government that takes all of their resources.
Yeah,
For instance, like
unfortunately,
when they had that huge power outage, and the U.S. government sent them, I don't know how many millions of dollars worth of supplies, and the government put them in warehouses where you had baby formula, diapers, water, food supplies for the people, and the government just took it and then just hid it in warehouses for months.
you're talking about Cuba.
Yeah,
Well, the thing about the government there, though, that is that every government is not perfect. Um, but when you look at them as a whole, and when you speak to people there, their government is a lot less corrupt than the US government. And even their electoral system is much more transparent and democratic than the US government. They don't have anything like the Electoral College. They have a straight popular vote. Um, Anyone can run for office. You don't have to raise millions or thousands of dollars and we'll run through all the hoops. They have regular people that run for office there. Right now, in 2019, the people ratified a new constitution that started at the local level and was voted up to the national level, which was voted yes. It was a people's created constitution. Um, and it's a pretty amazing thing. I mean, they're really doing a lot of really cool things there that unfortunately, if you don't pay close attention to, you're not going to really hear about here.
hmm, gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what certain types of issues with, like, I guess, capitalism, um, that you don't like?
What do I not like about capitalism? I don't like, um, and I say this as a former conservative. I don't know how old you are, but I was a
Late
Republican until I
20s.
was 22 years old. Okay. I was a Republican until I was 22, and I was a liberal up until, I don't know, maybe 2015, 2016. So I've kind of been all over the place. Um, and I understand each kind of ideology and why people are in them. But what do I not like about capitalism? I'm a worker. I work. And it is a system that doesn't benefit workers. I'm a municipal worker, so fortunately, I don't sell my labor to a company, and I have a little bit more rights and freedom than someone who sells their labor to capitalists. But I see what is going on in this country. I see how the worker is continuing to be crushed, and the quality of life is getting worse and worse for workers, and the options are getting less and less. We have two parties that do not serve the American people, and it's only going to get worse for people as time goes on. I don't like a system where the options are let these capitalists have all the power and, and suck it up and kind of worship these capitalists, even as some people do, or ask for a little bit more scraps and a little bit more progress that will, in the end, be taken back as the New Deal reforms were. I'd rather the working class control the state, the government, and the economy. I think that would be much better.
Hmm. So what would make people that are from other country, like socialist countries like Cuba or Venezuela, why would they have more of an incentive to move here?
Well, Venezuela is not really a socialist country. Venezuela just did what
The dictatorial
like
socialist country.
Well, it's not really a dictatorship. They have a lot more elections even than we have here. They've done the same thing that Portugal has done right now. Portugal, the three parties that are running Portugal right now are the Communist Party, the Socialist Party, and the Green Party. Um, Portugal has the benefit of being in Europe and not living, being on top of the largest oil reserve on the planet. So a white country that doesn't have billions of gallons of oil is going to be left alone, and most of us are not really going to be aware that that's happening. But yeah, only 30% of Venezuela's economy is publicly owned. But so that doesn't really make it a socialist country. They just had a socialist party win their election and nationalize their oil. But uh, what would make people want to live there? Is that what you're saying?
No, why is it so enticing for these socialists or non-capitalist countries, like the people that live there? Why does it make it so enticing for them to move here then?
Oh, I
Like if
mean,
people,
look,
I mean, you have people from all over the world, they'd rather live here. My friend's from Russia,
yeah,
and
yeah.
he
What I
moved
can
here
say
when
to
he was
that is,
younger.
yeah. So I'm half Latino and I'm half white. So I can understand why both my Latino sides came here. They came here because their countries were colonized by the United States. And when a country is colonized, whether they colonize it by the official means, like with Puerto Rico, turning it into official colony, invading it like they did to the Dominican Republic, or sanctioning it like they did to Venezuela, they will make, with all three options, they might make life so unlivable in in these countries that people will will move to the imperial core, and they want to survive, and that's people's, that's
Well,
our
they
basic
just want to.
instinct.
I mean, there's typically two reasons why most. We could just go off Hispanic cultures, I guess. So you could say Cuba, Venezuela, Guatemala or Mexico as examples. My best friend growing up is from Venezuela, moved here when he was 7, with his mom, who's a single parent. And to this day, still a lot of their family is still stuck over there in Venezuela and unable to move here. And
Hmm.
about once a week, they fill up a pretty good 3 foot, 3 foot by 3 foot box of just shit that you and I forget to buy at the grocery store: toothpaste,
Yeah.
toilet paper, shower, shower amenities, things like that we take for granted, don't even think about. I mean, most of the days that his family that still lives there, they don't have running water or electricity.
Hmm.
Most of them don't own cars. There's crime, violence.
Hmm.
It's pretty bad. I mean, you
Yeah.
have those people, they're escaping, a really shitty country to try to, you know, have a safe haven in a country that offers better, provides a better service to people to be able to make something of themselves, other than a country where you're born poor, you're gonna die poor.
Right. Right.
And then you have others that they move here to reap benefits that their country does not allow,
Right.
like coming here illegally, staying here illegally, purposefully to um, work a job that pays more than they could ever make back home, and then
Hmm.
living as minimalist as they possibly can by one or a group of them, and then sending as much money back as possible
Hmm.
that ends up ultimately, not stimulating our economy, which is kind of not what you don't want in a capitalist type of society.
Right. What I can say to that is that if you saw my backyard up until a month ago, we had a giant barrel in the backyard that me and my wife's family were filling up with stuff to send over to the Dominican Republic. And the Dominican Republic is not, it is a run by a neoliberal capitalist government that has been under the control of the United States for, decades now. And the conditions in the Dominican Republic are very similar to the conditions in Venezuela. And it's not under 160 economic sanctions like Venezuela. Everyone in the Dominican Republic is armed. You have to be armed. You have to be armed. Uh, I'm part of my family's from there, and whenever you go out, you have to be armed, and you
Hmm.
have to walk together to places.
Yeah.
Um, and there's no like walking down the street alone. And it's so funny when I went to Cuba, um, you see like women walking around by themselves at like 12 o'clock at night, 1 o'clock in the morning. And it's just a very safe country where people are just really like not on guard like you when you go to other countries. People are just very welcoming and kind and really intelligent. Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
So you support capitalism. What is it
Hmm.
about capitalism that you support and that you believe in?
Um, it gives people more responsibility and the ability to choose on how you want to live your life. Like I said, I have a friend. He's quite a bit older than me. But he moved here from Russia when he was in his 20s. He now owns a multi-million-dollar transportation company.
Okay.
Where I live, I make anywhere from 80 to $100 million a year, just transporting goods around the tri-state area. Um,
Hmm.
you know, uh, I mean, for
Okay.
me personally, it just depends on how much you want to work and make money. In my opinion, it sounds pretty dry to a lot of people, but I went to adult ed trade school for 10 months, 900-hour program for industrial manufacturing, which included PLC programming, robotics, automations, electrical and
Okay.
mechanical knowledge. Um, there's currently over 500,000 jobs that are in need right now, and just trade jobs that pay well over the median household income of the United States. But we look down at that as a country because the government back in the 70s created a PR campaign to boost tuition in colleges. So basically, say work smarter, not harder, go to college, not trade schools. Um, and it did. It boosted tuition about over 600% as of the current day. And you have a government that is loaning money to kids who don't know what they want to go to college for, which they don't even have in the first place. They don't got the money, so they're letting, you know, uneducated teenagers who've been pressured by their parents, the school faculty, their principal, their counselor to go to college for a degree that they don't know what they want. So they just last minute pick for a degree that typically doesn't exist, or, for a job that doesn't exist, I should say.
Yeah, the jobs don't exist there. Right, right, right.
Well, I should say in today's society, it doesn't really matter about what you have on paper, experience wise or knowledge wise. It
Hmm.
does, it is starting to matter more on your gender or your race.
Okay.
I've seen that.
Um,
Well, I guess that would be more so anecdotal evidence from what I've seen. Just
yeah,
working in
I would say so.
manufacturing, I worked in places before where, they hired a guy out of which I'm not going to dog on these people, but you have to understand from a safety standpoint, they've hired people in maintenance departments that have zero maintenance or any kind of experience at all, that are
Mhm.
ex-military just to get a military credit.
Right,
And
right.
that's a safety hazard. They have no OSHA training. They don't know how to lock out, tag out. They've never worked around a 480 volt cabinet. They don't know how to use a multimeter correctly. They're a hazard, and that's not something I want as a single parent. I don't want to have to worry about my life in the hands of somebody that's not trained. I've had
Hmm.
maintenance support. I've worked in maintenance departments that hired a female just because they had they had black guys that worked there. They had white guys and Hispanics that worked in the maintenance department, but they didn't have any females. And
Okay.
the maintenance director thought it was best that we diverse our department more, um,
Okay.
with somebody who was completely unexperienced. She had just had experience working in manufacturing facility, never
Okay.
turned a wrench, never worked on electrical or anything like that. Um,
Hmm.
but anyway, sorry, I kind of got off the beat path. Um,
Right, right.
but
So
I
you're a
mean,
worker.
so yeah, I work. I get
Yeah.
paid. Well, yeah, I get paid a good amount for the skills and knowledge that I have.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, it just depends on how you want to do, with what you have in life. My brother went to
Yeah.
the same school as my brother took the same course I did. And again, this is not this. You get college credits for this. This is a trade job. This is a trade school that we went to for a year.
Right.
And he works for one of the biggest manufacturing companies in the entire country, in the world, I should
Right.
say. He makes over 150K a year. And again, some of his subordinates are people that went to college. It
Hmm.
just depends on how much you want to know and what is lucrative enough to make you the type of money you want. Um, Capitalism gives you the ability to make what you want, or what you're comfortable with.
Okay. So what I would say to some of that, and I really can relate to a lot of what you said. What I can say to some of that is that I also got a trade. I'll tell you, I'm a paramedic with the New York City Fire Department. So I've been doing this for 17 years now in the medical field. You go to community college to become an EMT, and then you go for 2 more years, and you get
Mm-hmm.
an associate's in paramedicine. And I make more than a lot of people with bachelor's and master's degrees. Um, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that I joined the city. I got a city job, I got a union job. I got a job that workers for many decades fought very hard to improve our working conditions and our pay. We're
Mm-hmm.
actually at the end of the month supposed to get a raise that is going to bring us close to the cops' salary, which we've been fighting for since the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all because we united together and we had rallies and we went to city council and we caused a lot of noise, made a lot of problems for the city government. And finally, they're giving us a raise that we deserve. But
Mm-hmm.
see, what I say, that's not capitalism. That is organized labor and labor action. And when we look at prosperity in capitalism, we look at a capitalist country like the United States and we say, look at the great conditions that we have compared to other countries. But we have to look at what brought us to this place having these conditions. And it's not capitalism. Capitalism, pure capitalism in the United States, or the purest it got was during the times of slavery, when we dehumanized people and the government didn't even just look the other way, the government supported it. We had all over the Midwest and center of the country company towns where there was basically slavery as well, and the government supported that, and the government looked the other way. The Industrial Revolution, where we had child labor, we had, uh, 18-hour workdays, horrible working conditions, and finally, people united enough and fought hard enough, and that was socialists and anarchists that were leading the charge for workers to improve our conditions. And then finally, we had Teddy Roosevelt, we had FDR. The New Deal was written by communists and handed over to FDR, who then fought for those improvements to be ratified. And he only got about three-quarters of them. So when we really think about the prosperity in this country, we have to remember that it wasn't conservatives. Conservatives opposed every single thing that we have now, a 5-day work week. And liberals really look the other way. But it was liberals who were who were a little bit more open-minded and at the end of the day advocated for workers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a fan of liberals as well. I think liberals are, for the most part, full of shit.
You mean
But
like a democratic
conservatives,
liberal or a liberal?
I would say the Democratic Party and neoliberal policies, but I'd say liberalism in general, even internationally, is an ideology of, you know, basically maintaining the status quo
Mm-hmm.
and speaking empty promises to minority groups, oppressed groups, people of color, speaking, bullshit, empty promises, but in the end, being wolves in sheep's clothing and serving their corporate masters. And I don't agree with liberalism at all. And I definitely don't agree with conservatism that pretty much gives the middle finger to workers and to any group that is trying to better their conditions.
I understand that. I I always get a chuckle out of people. Well, and it's not in your you know, as a disrespect to you. I always get a chuckle out of people that misuse, or how the word liberal is completely misused in today's society, because the definition of a liberal is not what a democratic liberal is. It's somebody that, you know, listens to and understands, and accepts somebody's like an opposing opinion, kind of like what we're doing right now. Like, you have a more socialist ideology that, you know, think would benefit this country, and I have more of a capitalist, you know, ideology that I think would benefit this society. And it's being understanding of each party's, you know,
Hmm.
ideas. So I do consider myself I guess you could say, if you want to be genuine, and be a liberal conservative, which people would
Sure.
probably have a brain aneurysm in today's society not understanding that. um but yeah, I mean, I can understand your point of being of thinking that, like, more conservatives are it's the type of ideology to just give the middle finger to the working class and not care. But I think it's more beneficial to the workers, um, that they're more so looking out for people. I know, if you, I don't want to try to generalize anybody, so I guess I could just say Democratic or Republican. More on the Democratic Party side, you know, they want a livable wage, or they want, it's kind of mixed on this subject. It's either mixed of companies should provide healthcare, or, you know, the government should provide healthcare, um, uh, for these employees. Now, in a perfect world, that sounds great, but it destroys local businesses when you try to hike up the minimum wage. It makes it harder for them to keep the prices that they have and pay their employees more. Because typically,
They're
if you have a
already
business,
competing against these monopolies.
typically it takes anywhere from, you know, 2 to 5 years for a new business to start turning a profit. So
Right.
if you have a long, say you have a small business that's long, that, you know, long term's been around for 12 years. My friend's bagel shop, for instance, they make a lot of money at this bagel shop, and it's only open from 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. 7 days a
Right.
week. Now they could probably, and anyways, I think all of them anyways make about 15 to 16 at the minimum an hour. But if you
Okay.
force other small businesses that have only been open for a little, for less than, you know, say 2 years, or somebody just trying to start up a business, that makes it harder for them to compete price wise, but pay their employees the same amount, as well as tacking on health insurance
Correct.
for them as
Correct.
well. It's a big burden on small businesses, and actually would pretty much cripple small businesses in this country. And the only thing left would be your fast food restaurants, Walmart, Target, Sam's. Bigger corporations would be able to kind of eat that cost for a good amount of time, until they'd be able to get a politician in their pocket that'd be able to overturn something that would benefit them back to make a better profit. Um, but I do see the fact, coming from a manufacturing standpoint. If if you were to take just restaurants, for instance, if you were to, if tomorrow we wake up and they say, oh, we're, you know, we're raising the minimum wage to 15 an hour, 18 an hour, or something like that, I could bet you within the next year or two, I would be getting a phone call from a fast food restaurant asking me if I would come in and install robotics and automations into these restaurants. Because the only thing holding that back right now, I mean, you have McDonald's and Burger King right now are already investing money into it, into automations and robotics. The only issue is
Mhm.
upfront costs. I've worked on these
Right.
robots myself. I've worked on Yaskawa, Motomen, Fanuc, Epson, ABB, all of these different huge world known robotics companies, and they're not
Mhm.
that expensive to maintain. Yeah, when they do break down, in some cases, it can be expensive to fix, but 99% of the time, if they have an issue or a fault in the system, basically you have to walk over there with a pendant, plug it in, turn on the master key, and just reset to home position, and they turn back on and start working again.
Mhm.
And that would be your total end to a lot of workforces out there, and not just in fast food. But
Right.
you don't have employees that are showing up late, they're leaving early. You don't have to pay them an hourly wage. They don't ask for raises. You don't have to give them vacation. Your overhead insurance goes down because you don't have to worry about employees sticking their hand in the fryer or slipping on the floor. Um, I think it's either Lowe's or Home Depot has been doing an R&D project for the past couple of years. I want to say that the company they bought is somewhere in California, but it's just a small mom and pop version of Lowe's or Home Depot. They basically shut the place down for a couple weeks. They had an IT company come in and do a full inventory check of um, of their inventory. They digitized it, and they have a robotics company out of Silicon Valley that they are partnered with. And it's basically just these 4-foot robots. They sit outside, they stand in front of the door, and you just walk up. They ask if you can help them. They have 4K cameras systems built into them. They look at, hey, I've got a bolt, I need a replacement of it. And they take you straight to that aisle, exactly what you need. And then they ask if you need any other help. If not, they go back to the door. But that
Mhm.
right there, you just take away somebody's job, as well as the amount of time and effort it takes to train that
Right.
employee, to show them where everything is in that building.
Yeah.
But it can be worked across anything. You could probably kill about 50% of the jobs if you wanted to in automations. It just depends on how much their companies are willing to spend. You have, I mean, they do it with forklift operators right now. I mean, and warehouse work. And their best excuse is over 45% of warehouse incidents involve a forklift. And you can get,
Right.
and in some of these manufacturing places, like there's a big beer distributing plant that also manufactures beer, not too far from where I live. They axed like 60 jobs for these AGVs. They're automated guided robots.
Hmm.
You're talking, and this is a unionized, this is a union based workforce. They axed 60 or more jobs for these people because these unions have gotten them to pay, $43 an hour to work, to just drive around a forklift. That's not, in my opinion, it doesn't take a smart person to drive a forklift.
Sure. Sure.
That's a minimum skill job. That does not deserve $42 an hour when you have police officers making nowhere near that are getting shot at in shitty cities.
Well, I would say raise the salary of police officers, but let the forklift operator also make a livable wage. We would always complain about the cops and the firefighters here making more, but we were very careful to say we don't want them making less. You know what I mean? We're not trying to like punch up. We want to get up with them. Like, great, were you done though? Because I wanted to comment on what you were saying.
No, you're fine. Yeah, I had something else to say, but it kind of diverts into another slight topic.
So,
But no, you're fine. You
so
can
let
reply.
me So, like, since the 70s and companies started sending manufacturing overseas, we've seen a steady decline in the number of jobs. And that kind of goes along with what you were saying before, with like 3/4 of the college degrees have no work connected to it when they graduate. And it wasn't like that 40 years ago and before, where whatever you graduated with, like, you graduate at 22, you can buy a house, buy a car, you know what I mean? Like, in our generation, it almost makes more sense to get a trade or like some kind of tech degree. And now most of the jobs that people are going into are like retail or warehouse work or Walmart or food service. And those are the options that people go into. You were very smart to get into what you did. And for me, I think I was smart and fortunate to go into what I went into. A lot of people go into the military because I speak with people in the military all the time. They're like, I did not want to join the military,
Mhm.
but I had no other option in my town, and I really hope we don't go to war. And
Mhm.
that's what they say. But capitalism has no answer for the automation problem. And under capitalism, labor has a continually decreasing value. The value of one's labor continues to decrease, and there's no way to really stop that. And even if a workforce is unionized and they're pushing for more, at the end of the day, that workforce, the those the shareholders will have a say, and they want to see a return of their investment. So that's why you said they cut half the workforce. So automation is going to continue to cut jobs in the United States and in the capitalist world, and it's only going to get worse. And these companies are just going to grow more profitable, and with more profit they're going to have more power. and we're going to continue to call these people that are out of work lazy. And we're going to continue to say the call the people that have, what we call unskilled labor, which is going to be the majority of the jobs. Or you're unskilled, you're a forklift. We didn't really call people 100 years ago that pulled a lever for 18 hours unskilled. But before
Well, it's not.
those jobs were
Oh, sorry.
but before
I,
those jobs were shipped overseas, we didn't look at them that way. My grandfather, for an example, worked in a factory all his life. Uh, we never thought of him as an unskilled worker, because we just changed our view of that type of work. And I think a retail worker or a warehouse worker should be looked at the same way. So under socialism, we wouldn't have this problem with automation, because there would be the state would work hand in hand with the workplace to plan the economy and to make sure that people's needs are met first and foremost. That would be the role of the state. Instead of serving companies and serving capital, the role of the state would be, let's look at how we can meet people's basic needs, how we can have shelter, food, clean water, clean air, how we can have employment. I'll tell you a funny story. Like the Nordic countries, like Scandinavia, a lot of
yeah.
people call that socialism. That's not really socialism, but they took a lot of the best policies out of the USSR, and then they kept like the capitalism part. You know what I'm saying? So there's something like in Russia, it was very easy to find work. Like if you got fired from a factory, you can go to the work office and find another job the next day. Like a job was a human right, and they did that in Sweden as well. So like in the late 80s, early 90s, all these like heavy metal bands like exploded out of Sweden. I don't know if you listen to metal or anything. I do. So I read this article, and they asked one of the most popular bands, why all of a sudden out of nowhere did Sweden become like such a huge metal uh, place? And they were like, well, Sweden started offering this job guarantee where if you could prove to us that you are actually putting work into your art, your form of art, which music is a form of art, we will pay you to be in your band and to record and to tour, and we will support you, because there just were not enough jobs around for everyone to go. So they started paying artists and all these other people. And I think we have to start thinking like that here. There's just not going to be enough jobs. So if you want to do art, if you want to do music, if you want to paint, if you want to do something like that that you're passionate about, we should be able to do that, because automation, like you said, is going to cut the jobs even more.
hmm But the thing is that you don't really have right now. You don't have a lot of people that are doing that, like able to maintain this equipment, like program or troubleshoot PLC issues, work on
Yeah.
automations or robotics. But no basic mechanical or electrical skills. You don't have those type of people. Like I said, you have over 500,000 jobs currently today that are needed for trade, and you have nobody to do them. Like when Biden cut out that pipeline, I'm sure everybody was so happy about that. That would have made gas prices go down. Not to mention, I had friends that at the time they didn't work on it; they'd already left. But I had friends that worked on that pipeline. They were making over $100 an hour, and it was unlimited overtime. And these people were working 100 to 120 hours a week, living in a truck, had a phone payment, truck payment, insurance, and a gym membership so they could shower. And they just worked their ass off for a couple of years and made a shitload of money. And then they're just
Right,
like, "What?"
right.
I had a friend do that for a couple of years. I came back with a million or so. Um, he stayed here in this state for a little while and then moved down to Florida. Opened up a underwater welding company. He has somebody else manage it, and he just kind of sits on a beach
Yeah.
every day. He doesn't have to work. His wife doesn't have to work. He drives a brand new truck. His wife drives a brand new Cadillac. They, do whatever they want, travel whenever they want. And like I said, it's just how much you want to, how much you want to put effort into it.
Right. Like I see that, but at the end of the day, that guy living on the beach is not putting effort in. His workers are putting the effort in, and he's living off of the profit that they created at that point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but the thing is he sacrificed 3 years of his life living in a state that is completely barren with nothing to do, basically just
Mhm.
waking up, working, and then going back into his truck. But he made that
Yeah.
sacrifice. He made
Hmm.
that short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain, and he should be
Yeah.
able to reap. He should be allowed to reap the rewards of it. See,
I think that
the guys that work for him, the guys that work for him in that underwater welding company, they didn't think about going there
right, right.
to
I,
go to weld
yeah.
on the pipeline in the Dakotas.
And what I would say is that in a socialist society, that people still should be able to have ideas and be able to act on those ideas and be creative and but the idea that someone can have an idea, start a business, and then for the rest of their life live off of the labor of their workers and the pressure at that point is not it's not you're not just scot free after that because you're still competing with other capitalists. You're never safe as a capitalist.
Well,
There are
yeah,
other
you
capitalists
aren't
there are
because
other
you have.
capitalists who are trying to either put you out of business or buy you out. And a
Mhm.
lot of times, what happens with a lot of capitalists, like your friend or other people, is that they end up having to uh, pay their workers less. They have to put their workers in more difficult positions that they don't even want to do because of the stiff competition that is getting even stiffer and stiffer and stiffer and stiffer. And even with that, they sometimes lose everything.
Yeah. I mean, I understand what you mean. I don't think it's right that you have, a very small collective group of companies across the world that basically own 90% of everything.
Yeah.
I don't think that's right. It's I mean, it is free enterprise, but it's not in a way. You're not allowing other people to thrive. It's just greed. I understand that. I don't agree as much with that, or I don't agree with the amount of greed that goes on in this country. But I do think that people should be allowed, individuals themselves should be allowed to, if they have a product, create a product and be able to sell it if it's profitable and be allowed to reap the rewards of it for taking that chance.
Yeah, it's funny. When I went to Cuba, I spoke with one guy, and Cuba at the time was starting to open up to different types of enterprises. And this guy said, right now, he wanted to start a tech company in Cuba. And he says, they're opening up different businesses. Right now, I can't start a tech company. That's what I want to do. And I asked him, what if they allowed you to start your tech company,
Mhm.
but at a certain point, if your tech company was successful, you would be able to democratize a tech company, but at the same time, you would be able to have some type of benefit from then on because you created this thing. And he was like, that would be great. He was like, I would love that. But the fact that you would have to continue competing and exploiting and coercing workers for the rest of your life, I don't think is right. So, um, but I do agree with you. Like, have an idea. That is like one of the most basic human functions is to be creative. I actually think capitalism stifles creativity because there are so many workers who have ideas. Think about all the
Mhm.
Amazon and Walmart workers that might have an idea. There's no way that a lot of these people are going to bring in their idea to reality.
Mhm. I mean, no, I understand. While I was in school, I worked full time at Sears when they were around.
Oh
There's
wow.
probably people in the comment section that are like, "What the fuck is that?"
I
um,
bet. I bet.
but for a while, I was the backroom manager for a little while before I moved out into sales on the floor. And with that job in the back room, so you remember Sears, correct?
Of course. I'm
So like
39.
so with okay, I'm 28, so yeah, we both remember. So with their like the Craftsman lifetime warranty, with their ratchets, it's fine print, lifetime warranty that doesn't guarantee you a brand new ratchet. So my department in the back room, we were in charge of rebuilding used ratchets. Now they took the shell of a ratchet and they would basically, we would get these kits in that would be for that correct size ratchet, and you would just basically put all the guts inside of it and then send it out onto the floor. And then if a customer came in, that's what got swapped out. What I was noticing was is that we were not ever getting in the correct ratchets that we were going through, or we weren't getting them at all. So in most cases, we ended up having to give a customer a brand new one, which the cost is 10 times more to sell them or to give them a brand new one than to, basically have a refurb one. So what I had
Mm-hmm.
came up with, instead of when you pull out all these parts, most of them are reusable. I mean, let's say there's 10 parts in one ratchet and one out of the 9 is bad, but the other 9 parts
Right.
are good. If you
Okay.
properly cleaned them and put them in organized shelves, I figured that you could reuse old parts that were properly cleaned and were able to rebuild ratchets that you weren't getting kits for. They're saving the company money. And I based that
Okay.
out onto a chart, and I brought it to my store manager, and I said, listen, I said, if the 600 Sears stores implemented this, we could basically almost get rid of these ratchet kits we are buying and just use these, and we would have the correct ratchets on hand instead of having to give the customer a new one. I said this could save potentially. Now they're not correct because I'm not good at crunching that good of numbers. I said, but potentially you could be saving roughly $1 to $2 million a year, company wide, just for this.
That might have been a big deal for Sears.
And I talked to somebody from corporate and Sears once, and they never ran with it.
Right.
They thought it was going to take too long. And
Right.
so
Right.
yeah, I agree with you on that. If you and a couple years later, Sears went completely under, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so I do sympathize with you in some areas that companies, they don't listen to their employees when they do have legitimate, ideas or something to benefit the company.
Right. Yeah. No, they don't. And that's not even just, private companies. There are things in my job where the people in charge don't listen to us either. So I think that just has to do with not really caring about the people that they think are beneath them. Uh, yeah, some pretty bad stuff. I don't know. Sometimes I don't know how the people at the top get there.
Buy
Um,
American made and it'll provide more jobs. No, you do what Trump did when he was campaigning. And this is, again, like being in manufacturing. I looked at that very closely during the campaign of 2016. And Trump was very adamant that if these auto manufacturers specifically wanted to remove their plants here in America or build or extend other plants in other countries, then they were going to be taxed more for it, to the point where it would be more expensive for them to do that than to expand or build more manufacturing plants in here. And if you
mhm.
go back in 2016, around February, there's multiple articles. You had Hyundai, Toyota, Honda, even Volkswagen, and other auto
Okay.
manufacturers as well spent billions of dollars building new manufacturing facilities, upgrading or adding to their existing manufacturing
Mhm.
facilities, and it created tons of jobs. That was his magic wand, as Obama stated, that didn't exist.
Like one person in the comments said, right to repair. And I think that has to do with a lot of the products today. Like I know a lot of like smartphones, you're not allowed to repair them, or they would lose their warranty. And a lot of these products
Right to
today,
repair.
right to repair, a lot of these products as well have something called planned obsolescence, where they will send an update to your phone and it will just completely fuck your phone up.
Yeah, throttle it.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
they'll
Apple
throttle
Apple
it.
got sued. Apple got sued by a country out
Yeah.
in Europe over it.
And it's, yeah, and it's not just that, it's with a lot of things. I mean, when you look at, any product like a fridge. I bought a fridge a couple of years ago, and the shelves like broke after a
Oh, they're the
year.
worst. They're the worst.
And what ends up happening was year by year, the shareholders say to the board and say to the company, where are we going to squeeze more profit this year? And they'll say, all right, we're gonna fuck up the phones and we'll make the products a little shittier. And that's where we're gonna bring that stock price up. And they keep on making the products worse and worse and worse and worse. And it's getting to the point where, things made 20 years ago were much better than things made now. And that's just another aspect of capitalism that I just think doesn't need to be there. Um, when there's something that I say, I didn't make it up, but capitalism is a system that requires infinite growth on a finite planet. And we live on this finite planet, and we're lucky enough to be able to, uh, for the most part, like solve hunger, solve all these different things that for thousands of years we were not able to solve. Everyone can have shelter, everyone can have food, everyone can have clean water if we just work together to make it happen. But under capitalism, we still have this artificial scarcity where we have so many people that can't afford to buy a home. They have to pay landlords super high
Mhm.
rents.
Well, that's
They,
typically because of some slight, in a way, it is some slight socialist ideology. Like you have New York, or you could use California, for instance,
yeah,
where you have an extremely high tax rate.
right.
Um, but people want to live there no matter what. Like even if they got to live dirt poor, they just want to live there because it's the mecca. It's awesome. It's in
Mhm.
every movie. You're in that state. That's where that movie was filmed, and it's a type of mentality that's sickening. You have people that are, they'll literally go homeless just to live in California or New York
Right,
when you
right.
could betterment yourself and move to another state and become successful or have a better life. But they would rather work, they'd rather stock shelves at a grocery store and live in an efficiency apartment that costs $1,800 a month. I just don't understand. I got buddies that live in New York, and a lot of them have to live with their parents because they can't afford it. And I got buddies in their 30s, and
Yeah,
they live with their parents because
yes.
they can't afford to live on their own.
There's a
But
double-edged sword.
another thing too
Yeah,
is that
go on.
they can't manage their money at all. My buddy's 28 years old. He has a F80 M3. I don't know, probably a $50,000 car that he's probably dumped an extra $20,000 or $30,000 into it. Upgraded turbo, built motor, built transmission, like everything done to this car. But he lives with his parents because he doesn't know how to budget his money.
Okay.
Like the way he
Yeah.
hustles, if he moved to another state with where housing isn't double that of what it is in New York,
Right.
he could have a way better life.
Yeah, I understand that, but
Dude,
um,
stop talking about your
it's
buddies.
it's it's
Oh,
New
I'm
York and
sorry.
San Francisco that I would say
It's not
for the most
friends.
part are super expensive, and both of those cities have the two most high-paying industries in the country. New York has Wall Street, and the Bay Area has Silicon Valley, and those industries have a lot to do with the high standard of living in those cities. Um, I've lived in other parts. I lived in Pennsylvania. I lived in Ohio. I lived in New Jersey, and I moved back to New York, to be honest, because of the opportunities that the city had. There's a lot, and this is a lot of like what I said before. People a lot of times either choose to work like for their city or for the military, because
Mhm.
if you're going to be a worker, those are the two places where you're going to have like housing assistance, you're going to have healthcare, you're going to have college assistance. And I moved back with my grandmother actually when I was 24, when I was living on my own, but I knew that if I moved back home eventually I could move out on my own. But
Mhm.
the reason that New York is so insanely expensive is because of Wall Street, and the New York City government caters to Wall Street so much, and they're Democrats and they're phonies.
Yep. Exactly.
I'm gonna have
But
to
I
jump
don't know.
off in a little bit. It was so nice speaking with you.
Yeah, of course. It's nice to actually have a conversation with somebody that might have opposing opinions, but be
Yeah,
cordial about it, not interrupt each other. I know a couple of times we try to interject for a second, then we were pretty cordial the whole time. But I appreciate it. I'll give you a follow, man. Regardless
thanks,
if you have
man.
different opinions. Regardless if you have
I
different
appreciate
opinions,
it.
man.
Yeah, I swipe through these lives, and sometimes it's so frustrating. I'm hearing two people yelling at each other over the vaccines,
Oh
and
yeah, that's just crazy. I had some guy the other night. Oh my god! And I was trying to be as nice as possible, and he kept interrupting me, and he kept interrupting me, and he was just very. And I like, in my opinion, I don't care. Both of my parents are vaccinated. They should be. They're older, especially my dad. I mean, that virus would be a walking grim reaper to him, and so they both got vaccinated. But I think that, as science states, in my opinion, like, you look like it. I mean, you said you're an EMT. Is that
I'm a
correct?
paramedic. Yeah,
Paramedic. I'm sorry.
it's okay.
But I mean, like, to my knowledge, I would assume that like almost 100% of people that are paramedics are in very healthy condition,
We
and
are. We
you're
are.
under
We had a few
you're under
die.
you're under 50, and if you don't have any underlying health conditions, or anything that would also put you at risk for something as dangerous as the respiratory infection that it causes, there's really no reason for you to get it. I mean, it's like, I mean, this kid was trying to argue. He's like, "Oh, well, don't you want your parents to be safe?" And I was like, well, "Fuck yeah, I want them to be safe. That's why I encourage them to get the vaccine." He's like, well, "Why don't you get it to make them more safer?" And I said, "Because I'll still contract it if I get the if I get the
Yeah,
vaccine." I said, "The only
right,
difference
right.
is if I don't get the vaccine, I'll know if I got it because I'm not asymptomatic. I've had it before."
That's an interesting point. That's an interesting
And he
point.
was
Yeah.
like, "Well, that no, no, no." He's like, "Well, if you get the vaccine, then you have a less chance of getting it." And I said, "Yeah, I have a less chance of getting it, but I have almost 100% chance of not showing symptoms, which means I could bring it over to my parents, who would also have a chance of getting it." So maybe in a sane world, it's better for me not to get it because it's unnecessary if I have a 99.7% chance of living
Yeah,
through it.
yeah.
And
And
yeah,
also I just
he just couldn't wrap his head
yeah,
around it at all.
I just think that there's more than enough room to go around if people want to have a debate about vaccines. Like, swipe through these lives, you could find someone right away who wants to have a screaming match about
Oh yeah.
vaccines. Yeah, I'm just glad we could talk about other stuff. It was really good. Thank you so much, and thanks everyone else for listening, man. Have a good night.
Hey, you too, man. Have a great
All
weekend.
right, bye.